You can't afford the Olympic penthouse. Not dressed like that. People like you don't even belong in this lobby." The words fell from manager Thomas Whitaker's mouth like a hammer on steel, loud enough to echo through the Fairmont Olympic's grand lobby and pierce the quiet hum of conversations around. Guests froze, some mid-step with luggage in hand, others whispering as their eyes darted toward the confrontation. "Before I take you into what happened next, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe and like, because what happened in that lobby will never be forgotten." Jamal Richardson, a 42-year-old black man, stepped through the hotel's front doors with a quiet purpose. He wasn't dressed for business. No tailored navy suit, no polished leather shoes, no expensive watch flashing under the chandeliers. Instead, he wore a faded black t-shirt, a pair of jeans that had seen better days, and sneakers that spoke more of everyday life than corporate boardrooms. To the untrained eye, he looked like an ordinary traveler hoping for a place to rest. But Jamal was anything but ordinary. He was the CEO of Pacific Northwest Hospitality Group, and more importantly, he owned the very hotel where he now stood, undercover, watching closely to see if the online complaints he'd been reading for weeks were true. For months, whispers of discrimination had been building. Yelp reviews spoke of minority guests turned away. Posts on forums described front desk clerks who scrutinized credit cards more harshly if the guest was black, Latino, or Asian. One complaint even alleged that a guest's valid card had been confiscated and locked away. Labeled as suspicious, Jamal had seen these patterns before. He'd lived them at 24. He remembered standing in another hotel lobby, denied check-in because the staff assumed his clothes meant he couldn't afford the room. The memory burned like an old scar. Now, as the man who owned one of the most historic hotels in Seattle, he refused to let history repeat itself unchecked. He approached the front desk calmly, greeting the staff with the ease of someone who knew hospitality from the inside out. "Reservation for the Olympic penthouse suite," he said, sliding his ID and card across the counter. That suite, perched at the top of the hotel, was 3,000 square feet of marble, velvet, and glass, with sweeping views of the Cascades and a grand piano gleaming in its center. At $3,500 a night, it was the crown jewel of the property. Jamal had signed off on its marketing campaign himself, but manager Thomas Whitaker barely glanced at the reservation before sneering. "You?" Thomas said, his tone dripping with contempt. "The Olympic penthouse? That suite is reserved for people who can actually pay for it." His words weren't professional, they were personal, sharp, meant to sting. Emily Sinclair, a front desk clerk in her early 30s, leaned toward the intercom and smirked. "Double-check this reservation." "It doesn't seem right," she announced, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. A few chuckled. Jamal's jaw tightened, but he stayed silent. He had come to test the culture, to see what truth lived beneath the polished marble and crystal chandeliers. Raj Singh, another clerk, picked up Jamal's card with exaggerated caution, his lips curled into a sneer as he muttered, "Probably stolen. People like you don't stay in penthouse suites." The insult was not subtle, not coded. It was the kind of microaggression dressed up as procedure, the kind Jamal had seen ruin careers, vacations, and even lives. His stomach churned, his mind racing back to his father, who in the 1980s had walked into banks with business plans only to be humiliated, dismissed, and sent away empty-handed because of the color of his skin. That history was standing here again, alive in the lobby of a hotel Jamal had built with his own vision and hard-earned money. Across the lobby, Sophie Lin, a young Asian-American travel blogger, pulled out her phone. Her voice rang out, sharp with outrage. "This is racism at the Fairmont Olympic." She posted directly to X, her fingers trembling with urgency. Within seconds, Ethan Moore, a white tech consultant lounging with his laptop, lifted his phone too. "This is injustice unfolding right in front of us," he muttered, starting a live stream on Reddit. The lobby buzzed with the tension of cameras, of eyes, of people who knew something ugly was happening. But not everyone was silent. Sofia Martinez, the Latina concierge who had worked tirelessly in the hotel for years, stepped out from behind her desk. Her voice cracked but carried with courage. "That reservation is legitimate. This is wrong." She planted herself near Jamal, her dark eyes burning with the fire of someone who had seen too many customers treated poorly because of how they looked or where they came from. Guests began whispering louder now, some nodding in agreement, others clutching their phones to capture every second. Thomas's voice rose above the murmurs, firm and dismissive. "Invalid reservation. This is wasting our time. Sir, you need to leave before we involve the police." Emily leaned closer, her lips curling in arrogance. "Prove your wealth," she demanded, her words echoing like a courtroom accusation. Jamal's hands clenched into fists at his sides, his heartbeat pounding in his ears. He reached for his phone, dialing his assistant, Kendra Johnson. "Activate the system," he growled under his breath. On the other end, Kendra's voice came steady and firm. "Stay calm. It's ready when you are." The room shifted. What began as humiliation was fast becoming a test of wills. Sophie's voice pierced again from the back, her phone high. "It's going viral right now on X. Millions will see this." Ethan's livestream counter ticked higher as comments flashed on his screen, viewers condemning the blatant racism unfolding in real time. Raj held up Jamal's card triumphantly, walking it over to a small safe behind the desk. With a grin, he clicked it shut. "Fraudulent card locked," he announced, his words meant to humiliate, to cement the lie in front of witnesses. But as Ethan leaned closer, he read Jamal's name aloud from the reservation screen. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Whispers rose. "Richardson? Could it be? That name sounds familiar." Jamal's eyes locked on Thomas, his voice low and measured, though fury threatened to spill. "You're destroying the reputation of this hotel," he warned, each word like thunder rolling closer. The lobby buzzed louder, phones pinging with new notifications, guests pressing closer to see. The stage was set, the first blow of arrogance delivered, the first sparks of justice flickering to life. And that's just the beginning. Have you ever faced bias like Jamal did? Share your story in the comments, because together, our voices make sure injustice is never ignored again. ChatGPT said, Raj Singh's voice sliced through the air with a smugness that made the crowd wince. "Suspicious card. Locked away. Sir, you need to get out now before this becomes a bigger problem." His words landed like stones hurled at Jamal's dignity, and before Jamal could respond, Emily Sinclair's hand clamped down on his arm with a grip far too rough for a front desk clerk. Her voice raised for all to hear. "Leave this hotel immediately, or we'll call the cops and have you escorted out in handcuffs." Around them, gasps filled the lobby. Some guests covering their mouths, others pulling their phones higher to record every humiliating second. Thomas Whitaker, standing a step behind them like a conductor of prejudice, leaned toward Emily with a smirk that carried decades of entitlement and said, "Trouble like him ruins luxury hotels. Don't let him linger another minute." The insult struck deeper than the action. It wasn't about rules. It was about race, about exclusion, about telling a man who had built an empire in hospitality that his very presence was contamination. Jamal's body stiffened, his jaw set in granite, and though his eyes burned with fury, he spoke with measured restraint. "Return my card, right now." But Raj only sneered, the weight of the safe key dangling from his fingers like a taunt. "We don't return property when fraud is suspected. That's policy." The crowd stirred again, murmurs rising into voices of disbelief. Then, breaking the suffocating tension, Sophia Martinez stepped forward again, her courage blooming like fire against the cold arrogance of her superiors. "That reservation is legitimate," she shouted, her voice trembling but clear. "I checked it myself this morning, and I know exactly whose name is on it." The declaration rippled through the lobby like a spark through dry grass, igniting gasps and whispers. Jamal's identity still hung behind a curtain of secrecy, but Sophia's confidence hinted that the man they were humiliating wasn't some stranger off the street. Thomas snapped his head toward her, his face flushing red with rage. "Quiet, or you'll be written up. You have no idea what you're talking about." But Sophia didn't flinch. Her voice only grew stronger. "No, I know what I saw, and I won't let you lie about it." At that moment, Ethan Moore, who had already been streaming quietly, raised his voice so that every corner of the lobby could hear. "Reddit's watching this live. Thousands are already commenting. And they're not buying your lies." His phone buzzed with notifications, and the screen glowed with messages scrolling by. Classic racism on display. "Name the hotel so we can boycott it." Unbelievable. This still happens in America? Thomas's eyes widened at the mention of live streaming, his composure wobbling for the first time, but he quickly recovered, hissing, "You'll all regret recording this. None of this will matter once security gets here." But the words rang hollow. The truth was already escaping the gilded walls of the hotel into the endless reach of the internet. In the crowd, a man stepped forward, his voice dripping with venom. Charles Beaumont, a 55-year-old guest with a sneer as sharp as a knife. "Yeah, toss him out," Charles shouted, his voice loud enough to rattle the crystal chandelier above. "I don't want people like him in the same lobby as me. Ruins the class of the place." His words ignited fury in Lamar Brooks, another guest, who clenched his fists at his side and growled, "Say that again, and you'll regret it." For a split second, it looked like the lobby would descend into chaos. Fists raised, shouts blending into one another, but a few bystanders stepped between them, hands out, pleading, "Not like this, not violence, let the truth speak louder, still." The hostility hung thick in the air, ready to combust with the slightest spark. Jamal's phone buzzed in his pocket, and he stepped back just enough to answer. It was Kendra Johnson, his assistant, her voice steady even in urgency. "The system is active. Jamal, you have everything you need if this escalates. But listen to me. Stay calm. Stay in control. They're digging their own grave right now." Jamal's chest rose and fell with a deep breath, her words grounding him even as humiliation pressed against his ribs like a vice. He whispered into the receiver, "It's already beyond calm. Kendra." "They've crossed every line," she replied quickly. "Then let them show the world who they are. We're ready when you give the word." Meanwhile, Emily's grip on his arm only tightened, her voice sharp with the arrogance of someone who thought she held all the power. "You need to stop causing a scene. Sir, people like you make everyone else uncomfortable." That last phrase, "people like you," wasn't lost on anyone. Guests gasped, one woman covering her child's ears, another man shouting, "Did you hear that? That's blatant racism. Sophie Lynn, still recording," nearly screamed as she thrust her phone higher. "The world is watching. This is going viral. Right now." Her voice cracked with outrage, her words echoing through the vaulted ceiling like a call to arms. Jamal's restraint cracked slightly, his voice booming now with the authority he'd honed in boardrooms and business deals across the country. "Give back my card. Raj, you have no right to take it. This reservation is mine, and you will regret every second of what you're doing here today." Raj, still defiant, smirked and said under his breath, "Men like you, always pretending." But his voice was shaky now, the confidence slipping as guests began to shout louder, their voices combining into a chorus of anger. "Give him his card! This is discrimination! Shame on you!" The tide of the lobby was turning, and the staff could feel it. Sophia, tears glistening in her eyes but her voice unwavering, declared, "This isn't just about a room, it's about respect, and you've all trampled on it." Her words hit like a hammer, silencing even the whispers. Thomas scoffed, trying to maintain control. "This man doesn't belong here. End of story." But Ethan's live stream counter ticked upward again, comments flooding faster, and he shouted across the desk, "The internet says otherwise. Thousands are with him, not you." The walls seemed to close in, the once grand lobby now a crucible of truth and arrogance colliding. Guests pressed closer, some raising their phones higher, others simply glaring at the staff with a fury that grew with every second. Jamal's voice, low but firm, cut through the chaos. "This ends today. Every lie, every insult, every prejudice, you've shown it in plain view, and you will answer for it." And then, like a final nail in the coffin of their arrogance, Sophia revealed the detail that no one else dared to speak. She raised her chin, her voice strong. "Thomas, you've ignored at least 5 formal complaints about discrimination in this hotel. I've seen them myself, buried and dismissed. Do you want me to tell everyone right here what you called those guests?" The lobby gasped as Thomas's face drained of color. Jamal stepped forward, towering not in appearance but in moral weight, and thundered, bias exposed. "This charade is over." The crowd erupted, some clapping, some shouting, some weeping at the rawness of what had just unfolded. Phones buzzed with notifications, live streams surged in viewership, and the weight of years of prejudice cracked open in the heart of Seattle's most historic hotel. Jamal stood, battered by humiliation, yet unbroken, his fury now sharpened into resolve. The world was watching, the lobby was united, and the staff's house of cards was beginning to collapse. Tell me, if you were standing in that lobby, hearing those words, watching those actions, what would you have yelled at Thomas and his staff? Write it in the comments, because stories like this demand our voices, our outrage, and our refusal to stay silent in the face of injustice. Get him out of here now. This hotel doesn't tolerate frauds. Thomas Whitaker's roar thundered through the marble lobby, bouncing off crystal chandeliers and making guests flinch as though a gunshot had gone off. His hand slammed the counter for emphasis, veins bulging in his neck, as if sheer volume could make up for the lies already unraveling. Raj Singh grinned like a child enjoying cruelty, leaning into the intercom with relish and blasting across the room. "Attention staff, fraud alert in the lobby, suspect at the front desk." His words echoed down the hallway toward the elevators, cold and official, branding Jamal Richardson in front of dozens of onlookers as if he were a criminal. And then came the shove. Emily Sinclair, her face twisted with disdain, pushed against Jamal's shoulder, trying to force him back toward the exit doors. "You don't belong here," she spat, the words trembling with arrogance, but also with a thin crack of fear she didn't realize others could hear. The shove wasn't just physical, it was symbolic. The act of pushing a black man out of a space he had built, out of a place where his money, his labor, and his vision had been the backbone. Gasps rippled through the crowd, some stepping forward in disbelief, others recording as the tension snapped like a wire pulled too tight. Jamal's body jolted from the shove, his chest tightening, but he did not stumble. He stood his ground, staring Emily down with eyes that no longer tried to conceal the storm within. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life," he said, his voice not raised, but so sharp that every ear in the lobby turned. Sophia Martinez darted forward, positioning herself between Jamal and the clerks, her arms spread slightly as if she could shield him with her smaller frame. "You will not touch him again!" she cried, her voice quaking but resolute. The guests, emboldened by her courage, began to murmur louder, voices rising into shouts of support. "This is wrong! Give him back his card. Stop the harassment. The crowd was no longer passive. The hotel lobby had become a battleground of conscience. From the edge of the velvet chairs, Sophie Lynn's voice sliced through the chaos. It's on Reddit now. Tens of thousands are watching. She held up her phone, showing comments streaming in faster than she could read. Classic racism, boycott this hotel. Name the manager, fire him immediately. Unreal, in broad daylight. Guests craned their necks to see her screen, and the power dynamics shifted again. No longer was it just Jamal against the staff. Now it was Jamal and the public, millions of unseen eyes bearing witness. Raj's smug expression faltered, his grip tightening nervously around the key to the safe where Jamal's card lay locked. Still, he muttered. Rules are rules, and this man is a problem. But his voice had lost its edge, like a blade dulled by truth. Charles Beaumont, the older white guest, stepped closer, his face flushed with anger, and sneered. You heard them. He's a fraud. Kick him out already before he ruins the rest of our afternoon. His words were fuel on an open fire. Lamar Brooks, who had been watching from across the lobby, couldn't hold back any longer. He surged forward, his voice shaking with rage. You think you can talk like that and walk away? Say it again. I dare you. For a terrifying second, it looked as though fists would fly. Lamar's hand balled and Charles's body leaning aggressively toward him. A couple of guests rushed between them, shouting, Don't! Not like this! But the scene only deepened the chaos. Cries overlapping with the shrill ring of the desk phone and the distant buzz of notifications pinging on dozens of devices. Jamal inhaled deeply, remembering another night years ago when he had been 30 years old, traveling for business, and stopped in a hotel lobby where the staff refused to believe his reservation was real. Maybe this is the wrong place for you. They had said back then. He had walked away, humiliated, only to transform that rage into ambition, telling himself that one day he would own the very kind of hotel that had once rejected him. Now, in the present moment, he realized the cruel irony. He did own it. And still the prejudice was strong enough to try to shove him out. His past and present collided, his voice erupting with the fire of decades of indignation. You're finished, Thomas. All of you. Thomas sneered, masking the first flickers of panic with bluster. Finished? You? You're nobody. This is my hotel, and I run it the way I see fit. His words betrayed the arrogance of someone who thought class and privilege could bury the truth. But before he could continue, Sophia snapped back. This isn't your hotel, Thomas, and you don't run anything except a culture of hate. The crowd erupted in cheers and shouts, her bravery becoming the match that lit their collective fury. Ethan Moore, his live stream still climbing in viewership, turned his screen so that everyone nearby could see the comments pouring in. Expose their names. Seattle deserves better than this. This is historic. Watching live, he shouted above the din. The world knows your names now. Thomas Whitaker, Emily Sinclair, Raj Singh. They're all being exposed in real time. The clerks froze, the sound of their own names rolling across thousands of screens like a tidal wave. In the corner, Kendra Johnson's voice filtered through Jamal's phone in his pocket, recording everything remotely through the call. We've logged every insult, every slur, every refusal. It's already in the system. Just say the word. Jamal's eyes narrowed, his voice deep and calm as he leaned toward Thomas. When this is done, you'll wish you had treated me like any other guest, because the world will not forget your face or your words. The tension reached its peak when a group of guests physically stepped forward, creating a human barrier between Jamal and the staff. Emily faltered, her hands trembling, and she stammered. Maybe we should just let him explain. But Thomas cut her off with a growl. No, we don't back down. He leaves. Yet his words fell flat, drowned out by the chants from the crowd. "Let him stay! This is his right! Shame on you!" And then came the large twist. The moment the tide turned irreversibly. As Sophie streamed the confrontation, another guest whispered Jamal's last name into the crowd, Richardson. The whisper spread like wildfire. Richardson, the CEO? Heads turned. Murmurs grew into gasps. Some guests covered their mouths in shock, realizing the man in faded clothes was not just another traveler, but someone whose power dwarfed every insult hurled at him. Emily's face drained of color. Raj's hand trembled on the safe key, and even Thomas's bluster faltered for a fraction of a second. Jamal straightened, his eyes sweeping across the lobby filled with guests, allies, and adversaries alike. "You wanted a scene?" he said, his voice steady now, carrying the authority of a man who had built empires. "You wanted to humiliate me in front of strangers? Then let them see. Let them all see the truth about how you treat people in this hotel." His words landed like the final strike of a gavel, reverberating in the silent beat that followed. The crowd erupted, not with violence, but with applause, shouts of support, and the undeniable energy of people who knew they were witnessing something bigger than a check-in gone wrong. The staff, cornered and shaking, clung desperately to what little control they thought they had. But control had already shifted. The lobby was no longer theirs. It belonged to truth, to witnesses, to the viral power of the moment, and to Jamal, who stood like an unmovable pillar of resolve, ready for the reckoning that was about to fall. Thomas Whitaker's voice cracked with fury as he slammed his hand on the counter again. "Push him out! Now!" His words tore through the Fairmont Olympic lobby like a command from a general who believed himself untouchable. And before the sound had even finished echoing against the marble walls, Emily Sinclair obeyed, her palms slamming hard against Jamal Richardson's chest in an effort to force him back toward the gilded exit doors. The gasp that rose from the guests was not just shock. It was outrage, raw and visceral, like a string finally snapping after being pulled too tight for too long. "Enough." A woman shouted from the velvet chairs near the fireplace, "You can't treat someone this way!" And then the lobby shifted. Guests began moving, not away from the confrontation, but toward it. Within seconds, a wall of bodies formed in front of Jamal, arms folded, feet planted, standing like a shield between him and the staff who had just tried to expel him. Emily faltered, her hands trembling, the false confidence draining from her face as she realized she had shoved not just a man, but the wrong man, in the wrong place, at the wrong time. The chants began low, like a murmur in the back of the room, "Let him stay, let him stay." Then it grew louder, swelling into a roar as more voices joined in. Some held their phones high, recording the entire scene. Others simply shouted until their throats burned. "Give him his card back! Shame on you! This is America! You can't treat people like this!" The chandeliers rattled from the collective force of it. The historic lobby transformed into something it had never been before. A courtroom of public opinion, with dozens of witnesses acting as jury. Sophia Martinez, tears streaming down her cheeks, raised her voice above the din. "This isn't just about one man. This is about every complaint you ignored, every voice you silenced." Her words hit like a hammer on steel, reverberating through the air until even Thomas's arrogance wavered. From the back, Ethan Moore shouted, "The world is watching. Reddit is blowing up. Thousands of comments pouring in." He angled his phone toward Thomas, showing the scrolling feed. "Fire the manager now. Boycott this hotel. Seattle deserves better than this." The color drained from Thomas's face, his lips opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. But still, he clung to his last shred of authority. "Security will be here any second," he barked, though the words carried no conviction, for everyone knew no guards had yet appeared and none were coming. The only force in that lobby was the crowd itself, Ordinary people who had become extraordinary in their unity. Charles Beaumont, the hostile guest who had earlier demanded Jamal's removal, tried once more to rally the staff. "Don't give in to this mob," he growled. "Get him out. Show them who's in charge." But his words fell flat, swallowed by the crowd's fury. Lamar Brooks stepped forward, his chest heaving, his voice booming like a thunderclap. "The only mob here is you, people like you who think you can decide who belongs in a place like this. Not today. Not ever again." Charles's face reddened, his fists clenched, and for a terrifying second it seemed the two men would collide. But a group of bystanders surged between them, holding them back, their voices desperate. "Don't fight. Don't give them an excuse to twist this story. Stand together, not apart, in that boiling chaos." Jamal remained still, his silence more powerful than any shout. He was no longer just a man in faded clothes. He was the eye of the storm, a pillar around which the fury and solidarity swirled. His phone buzzed again, and he lifted it to his ear, his deep voice steady despite the noise. "Diane," he said, recognizing the board member's number. "It's time," on the other end. Diane Hargrove's voice carried the steel of decades in business. "Do what you must. The board is with you. The firings are authorized." Jamal's jaw tightened, the decision crystallizing inside him like stone. Meanwhile, Sophia pointed her finger at Thomas, her voice cutting through the chants. "Admit what you've done. Admit the bias you've buried in complaint after complaint." Her words landed like blows, each accusation heavier than the last. Emily stammered, her face pale. Maybe this is all a mistake." But Thomas cut her off with a snarl. "Enough. He doesn't belong here, and neither do you if you keep siding with him." Yet his words trembled now, stripped of the certainty they once carried. The crowd answered him, louder than ever. "He belongs here. Fire them all. We won't stay silent." Ethan, thrusting his phone higher, yelled, "You can't bury this. Millions will see every second." The lobby was no longer just a place of check-ins and reservations. It had become the stage of a reckoning, and Thomas was losing control with every breath. Raj Singh, still clutching the safe key, tried to hold his ground. "Policy is policy," he muttered, but his voice shook, the bravado melting away under the weight of the eyes boring into him. Jamal finally turned his gaze toward Raj, his eyes cold steel. "That card you locked away is mine," he said slowly, his words deliberate. "Final. You will return it, or you will face consequences you cannot even imagine." Raj swallowed hard, his knuckles white against the key, but he didn't move, frozen between defiance and fear. Kendra Johnson's voice came through Jamal's phone once more, her tone calm yet fierce. "We've logged everything, every insult, every shove, every humiliation. The system is primed. Just say the word, Jamal, and it's over." His hand tightened around the phone, his chest rising with the weight of history pressing down on him. He remembered his father's humiliation in a bank office decades earlier, his own rejection at hotel counters in his youth, the sting of being told again and again he didn't belong. Today, here, in this lobby, it all converged. He stepped forward, his voice booming now, carrying over the chants and cries. "This ends today. No more lies, no more excuses, no more buried complaints. You've shown your true colors in front of the world, and you will answer for it." His words cracked like thunder, silencing even the loudest voices for a heartbeat. Emily's knees buckled slightly, tears pricking her eyes as she realized the tide had fully turned. Thomas tried one last time, his voice hoarse. "Don't listen to him, he's nobody." But the words were drowned out by a chorus of voices chanting, "Somebody, somebody, somebody." Each repetition was like a blow, stripping away the authority he once wielded. Then came the very large twist that shattered what little ground the staff still held. A guest from the crowd stepped forward, waving their phone. "Look!" they cried. "There are posts, 5 different ones, from months ago about this exact staff, about Thomas ignoring racial complaints." They read aloud one review after another, voices shaking with fury, and the evidence piled higher with each line. The crowd roared in unison, their chants swelling into a tidal wave of outrage. Jamal raised his phone high, his deep voice cutting through the storm. "Diane, confirm it, on the other end." Diane's voice rang out. "Confirmed. They are done. Effective immediately." Gasps echoed, phones buzzed, and the staff's faces drained of color. The crisis had become a reckoning. The guests stood shoulder to shoulder, their chants now a wall of sound. Justice, justice, justice. And in the middle of it all stood Jamal Richardson, silent, resolute, unbroken, as the foundation of the hotel trembled beneath the weight of truth. If you had been standing there, watching a man stripped of dignity fight back not with fists, but with truth and the will of witnesses, what would you have shouted? Would you have joined the chants, or stayed silent? Share it. Because silence has never ended injustice. Voices have. The marble lobby fell into a tense hush, the kind that comes only when everyone senses a storm about to break. And then Jamal Richardson straightened his back, his presence expanding like a wave as he fixed his eyes on the staff who had humiliated him, his voice deep and commanding. "Enough. My name is Jamal Richardson. I am the CEO of Pacific Northwest Hospitality Group, and I own this hotel." For a second, silence reigned, a silence so sharp it seemed to slice through the chandeliers themselves. And then a collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Phones shook in stunned hands, mouths fell open, and even Thomas Whitaker's face drained of color as though all the blood had been yanked out of him at once. "You," he whispered. Disbelief etched across his features. But Jamal did not hesitate. He thundered on. "Yes, me. The man you shoved. The man you called a fraud. The man whose card you locked in a safe as if I were a criminal. That man owns every inch of this building. From the marble under your feet to the penthouse you said I couldn't afford. And today, your reign of arrogance ends." The words detonated like dynamite, and the lobby erupted, guests cheering, clapping, shouting, while the staff froze in horror. Their arrogance turned to ash in a single sentence. Emily Sinclair crumpled where she stood, her knees buckling as she sobbed openly, her face blotchy and red. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." But even as tears spilled, her words rang hollow, because the crowd had heard every slur, every insult, every ounce of prejudice that had left her lips. Thomas staggered back, his chest heaving, his voice weak and broken. This can't be happening. Not to me." His arrogance, once towering, now lay shattered on the marble floor. Raj Singh, still clutching the safe key with trembling fingers, looked as though he might faint, his bravado gone, replaced by a haunted expression as he whispered, "I didn't mean it. I just went along. I thought it was safer to—" His voice cracked, and he couldn't finish. Jamal didn't shout, didn't need to. His voice was steady, resolute, unstoppable. "Thomas Whitaker, Emily Sinclair, Raj Singh, you are terminated effective immediately. Pack your things. You will never work for this company again." He turned his gaze squarely on Raj, his words sharp as glass. "And you, Raj, you are banned from rehire across every property we own. This is permanent." The lobby erupted again, this time with cheers and applause that felt like justice itself. Phones buzzed, guests shouted, some even wept at the sheer power of the reversal. Sophia Martinez, who had stood by Jamal when it cost her everything, broke into sobs of relief as Jamal raised his hand toward her, his voice softening. "And you, Sophia, today you showed courage when others showed cruelty. From this moment forward, you are promoted, you will lead this lobby, and you will be rewarded for your integrity." The crowd roared, her name echoing like a chant. Sophia! Sophia! Her hands trembled as she covered her mouth, whispering, "Thank you. Thank you." Through tears that finally felt like healing. But the drama wasn't finished. Emily, still on the floor, her tears soaking into the carpet, blurted out a confession that stunned everyone. "We targeted them," she wailed, her words tumbling in a rush of desperation. "We targeted minorities, 10, maybe more. We marked them as suspicious, locked cards, denied check-ins. We covered it up. Thomas made us ignore the complaints, said it was policy. I swear, I just did what I was told." Her voice broke into sobs, her confession spilling like a flood she could no longer hold back. Gasps rose from the crowd, some shouting in outrage, others covering their mouths in disbelief. Sophie Lynn, phone still recording, screamed out, "You hear that?" They admitted it. This wasn't a mistake. This was a pattern. Her live stream exploded with comments flashing across the screen. "Expose them all. Fire every last one. This is criminal." Thomas clutched the counter, his body shaking, his mask of authority long gone. "Stop! Don't say another word!" he hissed at Emily, but his voice was weak, desperate, the voice of a man cornered. Jamal stepped closer, his presence looming. "The truth is out. Thomas, no more hiding behind policy, no more lies. You built a culture of hate in my hotel, and now the world knows it." The crowd erupted with chants again. "Justice! Justice! Justice!" And Thomas buried his face in his hands, his shoulders heaving as tears finally broke free. "I was raised this way," he muttered between sobs, his words spilling in broken fragments. "My father, he told me people didn't belong. I thought I was protecting this place. I thought..." He collapsed against the desk, sobbing openly, the arrogance gone, replaced by a raw, broken man finally confronting the ugliness he had carried. Jamal didn't soften, not yet, though the crowd hushed at the sight of a grown man unraveling. "Your father's prejudice is not an excuse for your actions," he said firmly. "Every insult, every shove, every humiliation you dealt was your choice, and now you pay the price." His words struck like a gavel, final and irreversible. Kendra Johnson's voice rang through Jamal's phone speaker. "The terminations have been processed in the system. Their access is revoked. Their names flagged across all properties. It's done." The crowd clapped again, the sound thunderous, their phones buzzing with live notifications as the story spread beyond the walls. Guests flooded forward, some shaking Jamal's hand, others patting his shoulder, their voices overlapping. "Thank you for standing up. This needed to happen. You've changed everything." Lamar Brooks stepped close, his voice loud and passionate. "You didn't just fire them. You stood for all of us who've been told we don't belong." His words drew cheers. And Jamal, though still burning with the fury of what had been done, allowed himself a nod of acknowledgement. Sophia Martinez, still trembling with gratitude, stepped beside Jamal and faced the crowd. "This lobby will never see another guest treated this way," she declared, her voice cracking but strong. "Not while I'm here." Applause erupted again, her bravery now fully rewarded. But beneath the celebration, the confessions lingered like smoke. Emily's sobs, Thomas's broken admissions, Raj's silence. They painted a picture darker than any single incident. This wasn't just about Jamal's humiliation, it was about a system of bias that had gone unchecked for too long. Jamal turned back to the crowd, his voice once more commanding. "This hotel belongs to all people, regardless of what they look like or where they come from. That is not a slogan, it is a promise. And today, it begins here, with change, with justice, with accountability." His words drew a standing ovation. Every guest on their feet, phones still recording, the sound of clapping like thunder rolling through the historic lobby. The humiliation had flipped, the power reversed, the truth exposed. What began as a shove toward the door had become a revolution in the very heart of luxury. Jamal Richardson had revealed himself not just as a CEO, but as a man who would not allow dignity to be trampled, not his own, and not anyone else's. The roar of applause still echoed through the vaulted lobby when Jamal raised his hand, commanding silence with nothing more than presence, his voice cutting steady and deliberate through the tension. This is not just about 3 employees. This is about a system that allowed their actions to go unchecked. Reform begins now. His words carried the weight of finality, and the guests hushed instantly, sensing they were not merely watching a firing. They were witnessing the rebirth of a hotel. He turned toward Sofia Martinez, who stood near him still wiping tears from her cheeks, and declared for all to hear, "You will lead this front desk effective immediately. Your courage, your integrity, and your refusal to stay silent are what this hotel needs. You've earned it." The crowd erupted in cheers once more, phones recording as Sofia covered her mouth with trembling hands, whispering, "Thank you," before bursting into tears again. Then Jamal's tone hardened, his words directed not at her, but at the room. "But this is only the beginning. Every policy, every training module, every ignored complaint will be unearthed and reviewed. No more burying bias under paperwork, no more silencing voices." The guests nodded, some clapping, some murmuring yes under their breath, the energy in the room surging with a sense of justice taking root. From behind the desk, Thomas Whitaker, his face streaked with tears, tried to salvage what remained of his pride, muttering, "You don't understand. There were more complaints. Dozens. We covered them because if corporate had known..." His voice trailed, the shame too heavy to finish. Gasps rippled across the crowd at his admission. This wasn't just one incident. It was a conspiracy of silence. Jamal's eyes narrowed, his voice like a blade. "Dozens? You admit you buried dozens of incidents? Then your guilt is greater than I imagined." Thomas sagged against the desk, his hands shaking, as if confessing lifted a weight even as it sealed his downfall. Raj Singh, pale and trembling, added in a broken whisper, "It wasn't just Thomas. Regional managers told us to look the other way, to flag minority guests as high risk. I did it because I thought it was expected." The confession landed like a bomb in the lobby, shouts erupting from the guests. "Disgusting! How dare you! They need to be investigated!" Phones buzzed furiously as Sophie Lynn's live stream picked up the shocking twist, her voice sharp as she narrated. "They're admitting it. Systemic discrimination, covered up at the highest levels." Jamal clenched his jaw, his chest rising and falling as the enormity of what he had uncovered settled in. He lifted his phone again, his voice calm but cold. "Kendra, connect with Diane now. Begin a full audit of every regional manager. If there's rot beyond these walls, it ends tonight." Kendra's voice crackled back instantly, steady and resolute, already drafting the directive. "Media outlets are requesting statements. They've seen the stream. King 5 is picking this up. Do you want me to confirm?" Jamal's answer was immediate. "Yes, let them report the truth. No more secrets." The lobby buzzed as his words echoed. This wasn't just about firing 3 people, it was about dismantling an entire culture of bias. Guests clapped again, some openly weeping at the raw honesty of it all. Meanwhile, Emily Sinclair, still kneeling on the floor, sobbed uncontrollably, blurting out, "It was wrong, all of it. I knew it was wrong, but I was afraid of losing my job. I thought if I stayed quiet, I'd be safe." Her confession only deepened the outrage, a woman in the crowd yelling back, "You thought humiliating people was safer? Shame on you." The crowd's fury burned hotter. But Jamal raised his hand once more, quieting the storm. His voice carried both authority and a hint of mercy. "Your fear is no excuse. Silence is complicity. You chose the easy path while others carried the weight of your choices. But this ends here." His words were heavy, Final. And Emily collapsed fully, sobbing into her hands as phones caught every second. The reform began in real time. Jamal turned to the crowd and spoke like a leader addressing his people. Starting tonight, every guest who has filed a discrimination complaint in the past 2 years will be contacted personally. Their cases will be reopened. Their pain will not be ignored. Gasps and applause mixed together as guests realized this was not a symbolic promise, but an actionable change. He continued, his tone ironclad. We will implement new training, led not by hollow consultants but by people who have lived the experience of discrimination. We will hire voices that were once silenced, and we will not stop until every person who walks through these doors feels they belong. The ovation was thunderous, shaking the very air of the lobby, tears on some faces, determination on others. Charles Beaumont, the hostile guest who had earlier jeered at Jamal, stood in stunned silence now, his earlier arrogance shattered by the tidal wave of justice rolling over the room. Lamar Brooks, voice strong and full of conviction, shouted toward him, "This is what change looks like. Either stand with it or step aside." Charles dropped his gaze, speechless for the first time, and the crowd's cheers drowned him out. Jamal's phone buzzed again, Kendra's voice coming through. "Diane has confirmed. The firings are finalized, and a public announcement will be issued tonight. She's backing full reform and will push for industry-wide review." Jamal closed his eyes for a brief moment, exhaling the weight of years before raising his voice for all to hear. "Then it begins now. Not tomorrow, not next week. Now." The words ignited the room. Claps, cheers, and chants of now, 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 shaking the lobby like a rallying cry in the middle of it all. Jamal remained calm, dignified, resolute. He had entered the hotel undercover in faded jeans to investigate whispers of prejudice, and now, before the eyes of guests, staff, and the entire internet, he was tearing down a system of discrimination brick by brick. Reform wasn't coming. It was happening in real time, in the very lobby where humiliation had begun. The echoes of chanting still lingered in the Fairmont Olympic lobby when Jamal lifted his hand, bringing the crowd to a hush, his voice low but resonant, carrying the weight of everything that had unfolded. This isn't just about a few firings. This is about a legacy. A promise that what happened here today will never happen again. Guests leaned forward, phones poised, hearts pounding, knowing they were hearing the conclusion to a moment that would ripple far beyond marble walls and velvet chairs. The staff who had once sneered now stood shattered, their names already burning across the internet, their faces etched into millions of screens as examples of arrogance undone. Thomas Whitaker, still trembling, whispered brokenly, "I never thought it would end like this." Emily's sobs filled the corner, her once arrogant tone replaced with pleas. "Please, I didn't mean harm. I was just." But the crowd silenced her with a collective glare, the memory of her cruelty too fresh. Raj sat pale and ghost-like, head buried in his hands, realizing the ban was forever. Jamal did not linger on their downfall. His focus was forward. He turned to Sophia Martinez, the new face of courage, and raised her hand in front of everyone. "This is the future of hospitality, honesty, dignity, inclusion." Applause thundered, the crowd chanting her name, tears streaking her face as she mouthed, "Gracias." Then Jamal's tone shifted to the larger world, his gaze sweeping the guests and cameras alike. "Tonight, every guest harmed in this hotel's history will receive a personal apology and compensation. No voice will go unheard again." The lobby shook with cheers, the words reverberating beyond the walls as Sophie's live stream ticked past 1 million views. Headlines already forming on King 5 News. Seattle CEO fires staff over racism in historic hotel. Guests applaud. Lamar Brooks raised his fist, his voice booming with pride. "This is what justice looks like," and the crowd roared in agreement. But then came the final twist. Thomas, choking on guilt, blurted out, "It wasn't just us. Regional directors knew. They told us to ignore complaints. They told us to treat minorities as suspicious." Gasps broke the air, the crowd buzzing like a hive, the truth deeper and darker than anyone expected. Jamal's face hardened, his voice like iron. "And now we expose them too. This ends not just in this lobby, but across every property in our group." The promise landed like thunder, the guests chanting again, "Justice, justice, justice." Phones buzzed with notifications, comments flying in. "This is historic. Change is happening right now. Finally, accountability." Jamal's voice rose one last time, not in fury but in resolve. "I built this company to honor my father's dream, that no one would ever again be told they didn't belong. Today, we begin to fulfill that dream." Applause erupted, some guests openly weeping, others clapping until their palms stung. And as the lobby slowly quieted, Jamal ended with a call that reached beyond Seattle, beyond hospitality, beyond that single day. Stand against bias wherever you see it. Speak when others are silent, because injustice cannot survive when we choose to confront it together. The crowd rose to its feet, the sound like a tidal wave of affirmation, history being rewritten in real time. 3 months later, the epilogue proved his words had not been empty. The Fairmont Olympic gleamed not just in marble but in reputation. Complaints of discrimination had dropped by 40%. Diversity in hiring had risen by 25%. And guest satisfaction soared from 4.2 to 4.8 on TripAdvisor. Sophia Martinez led the lobby staff with pride, her photo framed at the desk as a symbol of change. King 5. News aired a follow-up segment, hailing Jamal's reforms as a model for the industry. Guests who had once been humiliated received personal letters of apology and $500 compensation, many of them returning with renewed trust. And the Pacific Northwest Hospitality Group rolled out sweeping new policies across all properties, including mandatory training led by voices who had lived discrimination, ensuring the lesson of that June afternoon would never fade. Jamal walked through the lobby not in faded jeans, but in quiet dignity, his eyes reflecting both the pain of what he had endured and the pride of what he had built. He knew his father would have been proud, that the humiliations of the past had been transformed into a legacy of justice, and for everyone who had watched, live or online. The memory remained clear. A man who had been told he didn't belong had stood tall, revealed his truth, and in one unforgettable afternoon, changed everything. Thank you for watching. If this story touched you, please like, subscribe, and share. Your voice keeps justice alive.